Welcome to the new and improved ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is now a place where we interview senior thought leaders in the SAP space across Australia and New Zealand, and the aim is to tap into their knowledge so we can pass on their insights to the listening SAP community. Please subscribe to the podcast and like, share and comment across Castos, YouTube, Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to donate to the cause, please click the link below.
Hello and welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. And Bethany, my colleague, is back along and you've got a fantastic guest today.
I do. So this is Jason Anthony, who's the head of SAP Capability at SAP Power Networks. And many of you will be familiar with him already because SAP Power Networks has had one of the most successful, brilliant S/4HANA implementations in the market. They're quite well known. And Jason has some very specific reasons as to why he feels they've been so successful. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bethany. And appreciate the invite to come on to ConfigureITDone. It's great to catch up in person and talk about a topic which is, I think, probably dear to both of our hearts. So.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's dive straight in. So I'm sure you need no introduction, but got a question that I know you and Bethany have been speaking about before. And the first question we'd love to ask is, what are the elements of creating a successful SAP S/4HANA program?
Yeah, there's a lot of parts that make it up, and and obviously from project delivery point of view, you've got your core make sure you've got clear scope, you've got your milestones, you've got your governance and gates and so forth, and all that sits in there. But there's probably four areas I'd look at and say, putting all that project management deliveries to the side. I think if you're going to go down this journey, it's important to make it business-led and IT supported. So don't go in saying it's a technical activity that we're doing and we're imposing it on the business. You'll get much greater buy-in from the business, much greater take-up and acceptance from the business if they go along the journey right from the start. So I'd definitely be encouraging that's the approach it should take. Make it business-led, IT supported. With any of these large programs, quite often you'll have to be involved with, or you'd want to be involved with SI partners to do this, or a significant number of contractors to deliver these sort of programs. So commercially, it's important to have good contracts in place. If you do the hard work at the front, making sure all the I's and T's are dotted and crossed, it makes it easier down the path when you have some challenging moments that contractually it's really clear roles and responsibilities, who's responsible for what, and real clarity on that. There's nothing worse halfway through a program. I always think if you have to pull the contract out during a program like that, you've failed right at the start when you should have been, nailing these out in the first place.
That's a really good point, by the way. That's not, so we've discussed this topic in kind of different capacities with different leaders, and nobody's quite brought up the contract piece in that way before.
Yeah, it often gets overlooked. It's one of the things you go out, you go through the process, pick a partner, and off you go running. And it's a quick tick and flick with procurement. But it is important to really look and understand those roles and responsibilities, because at the end of the day, that's what everyone's going to be held accountable from a commercial point of view.
So is it about forward playing every single possible scenario then and bringing that to light and having that conversation, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And, particularly, you go out to the market and you'll get an SI partner that hopefully has got experience in doing this, and that's why you're selecting them. So definitely bring that to the table of their experience. Don't feel like you're creating a contract and imposing it on them. Have that discussion and collaboration about commercially what's right for both parties. Because, I always look at any commercial agreements that I go, it needs to be a win-win outcome. You need to commercially have a win-win outcome so that both parties can be and will be successful coming out of this. There's no point trying to commercially, make things difficult for one party and not the other, because, all you're doing is increasing the risk in your own program that sits there. So I think if you go in with the right mindset, spend that time up front and getting it correct, everyone will be better off in the long run for that. So
I agree. This might be slightly off topic, Jay, but that reminds me so much of Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator. He talks about that a lot. Both parties need to feel like they've won or everybody's lost.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Absolutely. Probably thirdly, I'd say, get that executive support. So make sure from a steering committee, you've got your key executive members in there. In our case, during our journey, we had our CEO and a significant representation from our general managers on board. So make sure you've got that right representation at the top and backing and support so that it makes it easier to have those discussions throughout the course of the project. And you've got buy-in from top level as it cascades down. And then lastly, which is probably key to what we're here to discuss, we're a very big one team culture within the organisation. So with these size programs, you've got many partners, contractors, etc. So you end up with a collection of individuals, and that's what they are, is individuals. Very quickly, what you want to do in place is put in a culture where it's one team, so that you're all collectively understanding the common goal that you have and working together on that as together. One of the very proud things I think I have within our company is I always say, if you come and visit us at SAP Power Networks, walk through the floor and you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between an employee, a contractor, and SI, or whatever. They're one happy collective group driving towards goals and driving that. If your environment is not like that, I think, you need to have a look at your culture, and there shouldn't be the them and us that sits there. So I think they're probably the four things. I think business-led, contractually make sure it's right, executive buy-in and sponsorship that sits there, and one team culture that sits there.
That's brilliant. I want so badly to touch on all the other points, but I think I'll stick to the culture. Otherwise, I'm going to make this go for well over an hour. So we've spoken a lot about culture, you and I. I'd love to hear what culture means to you, because it's kind of a buzzword at the moment, but fostering a culture that works for everybody and fostering a culture that leads to excellence, program management, everything else is a lot easier said than done. So what does culture mean to you?
To me, it's key. We're a company that is focused on poles and wires. That's what we do in the utility space. Our most important asset is our people. So it's their ability to deliver. If they have an environment which is safe, supportive, allows them to be innovative, allows them to succeed but also fail and learn from it and move forward, then you're really building that culture and that environment that allows people to be the best. And I think, fundamentally, everyone that gets up and comes into work wants to do the best and wants to be the best, and be challenged and stretch yourself as you go forward in your careers. That environment you need to build and foster to allow that to happen. And it needs to be across the entire organisation to do that. So culture to me is very key in anything that we do, particularly, when we're talking about the HANA programs and CE.
We're part, so the leadership team here, they allow that as well at Precision. They encourage people to fail and learn from mistakes. They encourage people to grow. They encourage people to come together as one. But how do you cultivate your leadership team to create and nurture that great culture?
Yeah, it's culture doesn't happen, and I think some organisations that's how they feel. It's sort of just going to evolve and happen. It doesn't. I think you need to think about how do you want the environment that you want to be in? How do you want to be seen? I think you need to look at that, and you need to continually reinforce that message. It's not something you kick off at the start and say, right, everyone, this is how we're going to be. I've done that, tick that off, and the next 2 years we'll go on this program. It needs to be continually reinforced and looked at, particularly with if we look at our project teams today. I think there's a greater level of diversity within our project teams now more than ever. And across the entire gamut, it's not only just where people are coming from, but their religious beliefs, ideas, etc. So your culture needs to embrace that. You need to look at that diversity and their strengths that you have within your team. So you should be looking at that, embracing that, and bringing that out even more, because I think that is really a strength that potentially sometimes doesn't get tapped. It's sometimes an untapped quantity for you. I think as leaders, we need to, we get judged on what we do, what we say, and how we act. and everyone around us will look at that, hear it, and monitor and see what goes on. So we need to walk the talk there. So there's, if you're going to have that culture that we're talking about here today, you need to represent that, and you need to believe in it. And those around you as a leader will see that. They will copy to some extent or mimic. But if you have certain bad traits that you show, others will see it and think that's okay. That's acceptable in that environment. So I think it's important as leaders that we have a good understanding of what the culture is that we want, and then actually show that all the time. And I think it's important that we hold each other accountable. So where you see certain traits or activities that doesn't fit the culture that we want to have within the organisation, it's okay to call it out and have discussions with others and say, hey, I don't think this is appropriate, or I think we're not really being as collaborative we should be. We're probably what's the issues that sit there, and I think that's an important activity to do. And I think with any program that you kick off, you need to sit down and do that, defining what is it that we're about, understand who your partners are that are coming on board, and how do you want to foster that going forward. Because you've got to remember, cultures, for a program like this, you've got the culture within our organisation and how we operate, and then we invite all these people to come in and help us deliver. They have different cultures and how they operate, consultants, contractors, whatever it might be, and even overseas, completely different. So you need to think about that and say, okay, how do we want to operate going forward, considering all that diversity that sits there? So that's probably.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Jay and I actually met with one of our favorite clients a couple of weeks ago, and he's originally from India, and he was going to a meditation retreat, and just something like that. I mean, it's not something, it's becoming commonly done here, but that's very much specific to his background and culture, and everything that he'll be able to bring back from that retreat. He was talking about, he was doing a meditation retreat to learn how to basically meditate for 20 minutes to refresh his energy. Mm-hmm. And this is something that's starting to get studied and has a lot of scientific basis, but isn't very common here in the West. And things like that would be so helpful in projects if you have those that will listen and say, that's interesting. How do we implement that in the team? I think it's special.
Yeah, we have sessions like that where it's check-ins or mindful thinking, where you can have that time and that sort of principles that sits there. And I think that's a different way of thinking, different sort of cultural diversity that sits there. And I think we need to be open to those. It might not be for everyone, but you provide that opportunity for people to experience that. And if that's what they like and embrace, that's great. It's you only get better productivity out of everyone. So
100%, I agree. We do a lot of cultural check-ins too, Jay. We have morning meetings, and we talk a lot about mindset, energy management, all of that. And it is very important. So I guess the biggest question we have for you, because like I said, we've been working with SA Power Networks for a while. You've been a client of ours for a while, but we've heard SA Power Networks S/4HANA program referenced so often in the market because it was so successful. And not only does Australia have very few S/4HANA programs that have been completed, but even fewer that were highly, highly successful. So you talked about the 4 different kind of pillars for a successful program before.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you can tell us about why you think SA Power Networks saw so much success with their programs?
Yeah, we've had 2. As I said, we've done 2 S/4HANA deployments. Back in, I think it was about 2019, we went through an exercise. It was a greenfields deployment of a SAP ISU with NPM. And the driver for that was really we were looking to decommissioning our billing, marketing systems, metering systems, and so forth, which was spread across various vendors and products, consolidate it down to a SAP solution in ISU using the NPM product, and we did a light touch C4C as well in there. So we're looking to do that greenfields exercise. It was about a 2-year project. Significant investment and a number of 100+ people on the program for 2 years. We partnered with Capgemini as our SI partner. We brought in Wipro to do the data conversion, and we had SAP delivering the NPM solution. So we talked about commercially at the start, there's quite a few players, and we went down that path specifically. We didn't want one company doing the lot. We spread it across multiple, so we had some clear accountability across the various participants that were in there, and clear ownership.
I have a quick question actually before you move on to that, because that's fairly common. How do you manage so many different SIs in order to keep everything running, I guess, as smoothly as possible? I just didn't want to lose that train of thought because it's relevant to what you're saying.
Well, one of the things, that one culture that we talk about, we brought them all on. Commercially, we made sure there was clear accountability. We had those parties actually talk as well. So it wasn't, oh, here you go, here's a new company, it's just walked in the door. They all talked and understood where they sat. From an executive point of view, they all had a seat at the steerco. So sometimes you have steering committees where it's just the internal company. We actually had them have a seat at the steering committee with our exec management team. So they had clear responsibilities, and they would talk to those at the steering committee level. So that got great buy-in from them. At the next level down, from a project delivery point of view, to help foster that one culture environment, we buddied them up. So if you, for example, for Capgemini in the SI space, we would have, some key functional people in metering or billing and so forth. We would partner them up with their counterparts within our company. So we then had, representation on key core functional areas that we needed to work through during the course of the project, but it would be a collective team that automatically buddied together. So there was never any of the them and us scenarios or throwing stuff over the fence. They collectively worked together on solutions, and were held accountable on that. And that was a really effective way of getting rid of that them and us scenario and building a one team culture, because they work together, and very quickly they were best of mates and they're working on solutions, and you could just see it take off. It was absolutely brilliant to see.
I'm curious, Jason, just on that kind of multiple SI chain of thought there. Did the location, like being in Adelaide, play a part to that, with maybe one company not being able to provide every single resource? So is location play a part in that, or not really?
I mean, where we're located, I guess, in the SAP space, we are startup resources, particularly in that space in Adelaide. So it is, Eastern Seaboard has the bulk of the resources that sit there. So it is difficult for us to get that. I think commercially, when we looked at, partners, the billing and CRM program, which is rolling out ISU, was such a large program over 2 years. You needed key experience from partners like Wipro did the data conversion. So they were experts in that area. They had prior experience, so we were bringing them in. Capgemini had experience in the S4HANA, so you're bringing in that core great talent to help complement what we would never be able to get locally. That space. So, and it is key. And, we had a team all over the world, working on this. We obviously had core people in Adelaide, but we had people in, in Asia, in Europe, in America, New Zealand. It was completely a world effort in regards to that.
It's just so interesting to hear, because that is a very common scenario, is you have multiple SIs on site, but normally when I hear that, I cringe, because that most likely there is very much an us versus them mentality, and it's not just between SI and the end user, it's between multiple SIs, and it becomes really chaotic. So it sounds like the key is the actual company leading it from the front to ensure everybody's on track. It can't be led from the SI. It's got to be led from the company to ensure everybody feels like they've got a seat at the table and there's no reason to be, competitive. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting them in at that steerco level, everyone's got a seat at the table. There's, you're going to have those executive discussions that are, them and I sort of dilute very quickly when you've got everyone with a seat. I think, personally, I think the vendors involved enjoyed having the seat at the table, because they can actually articulate and hear what's going on and have their say and input and feel like they're heard. And then at that project delivery level, by partnering up and building those teams, they just fostered and just grew. It was great watching them grow as to and the drive. And we're talking about at the start about allowing people to be the best. You could just see that take off and nurture as people were challenging each other and really pushing outcomes that sat there. So that was exciting. So we did that, as I said, for 2 years. We completed that. We delivered on time, on budget. We picked up. The Australian Institute of Project Management gave us nationally the best project of the year, and we went over 2 years ago. Our project director Trevor went over and presented it at the SAP Utility Conference in Europe to show, not all projects blow out and have difficulties in being delivered. There is ones that are very successful. So, and it was without a doubt probably the best, for my career-wise, probably one of the best projects I've worked on. Of what we achieved in that time frame and complexity to deliver, on time and budgets. Fairly rare scenario that sits there. So
it is. We can say that from experience. Jay and I have both done this I'm 6 years. I think you're the same, Jay, or maybe longer now. And it's not often that you hear one that's done on time and on budget. And when you have a project manager that's managed a project that was on time and on budget, it's like the golden ticket. There's a level of excitement because it's not common. I think if I were to summarize everything you've said today, it sounds like just really radical accountability is what's most important. Everybody is accountable for what they need to do. Everybody's accountable for how they behave. Everybody's accountable for the culture they bring to the table. The SIs are accountable for fostering the same culture. It sounds like just giving everybody responsibility and holding them to that has been really key people-wise, on top of the 4 pillars that you mentioned when we first started.
Yeah, and I think, it's a model that works because we delivered that, as I said, a couple of years ago, and then we've just updated our EC6, which is a brownfield. So we've taken our ERP systems and moved that into the cloud and moved it to S/4HANA. So, a slightly different approach and project, but we used the same model and the approach that we did that. So it was great to see something that had worked before. Does it apply? We had EY as our SI partner in there. And, so we had different players and different people when it worked, successfully again. So we know it's something that works, and, it's a bit of a cookie cutter approach that we're taking to any of our major projects that we do now.
Jason, there's some fantastic insights I really appreciate. I'm gonna ask you to think about this question, and it's a parting question and a message to different customers that might have been in a similar position to 3 years. But what's your top 3 learnings from going through 2 S/4HANA programs? And then lastly as well, who else would you like to listen to on this podcast? So a couple of questions there.
Probably 3 learnings. I think any of these large programs, if you're doing S/4HANA, it's, I touched on it at the start, bring the business involvement, make it business-led. You have to bring that journey. And S/4HANA deployment is generally corporate-wide. It touches everyone that sits there. So bring the company along the journey. Don't treat it as an isolation IT activity or technical activity that's taken place. Bring that journey on board, get that senior executive management that comes through, and that takes a big step forward in having success. Because when you get to the end of the deployment, you go, hey, we're done, and no one's really using it or bought into it. Difficulties just happen for years afterwards. So there's that aspect. I think, I touched on, our environment culture of that one team is so important. I've said the people are the most important things. You can have as many tools and wonderful automation and all these other things that sit there, but it's the people that will make the difference in the outcomes of success, particularly during challenging times. So it's being able to bring those people together, look at how that works in a very diverse environment that we have in that space. And I think another thing, we haven't really touched on is, celebrate the success. So any of these large programs that we have and you go along, there will be challenges. There will be times where you get things wrong. That's fine. Foster that, embrace that, learn from it and move forward, but also make sure you celebrate that success that comes through, because sometimes when you have large programs, it's the little things that you need to chunk it up and think about, it's step by step, bit by bit that you build that success to the end goal that sits there. So I think probably those 3 things would probably be some advice in that space. Someone coming and having a chat going forward. I think I'm very people driven, and we've talked about that heavily within this. So I'm really keen for people and innovative ideas. How can we do things differently? How can we approach things differently? I think we're definitely going into an environment now where people have done a lot of talking about AI and what that means. So it would be interesting, as that journey goes forward, what does that mean for us and roles and delivery and tools that we use, and how that impacts. And I think depending on how people embrace that AI and that technology steps that we're making, some are fearful, some aren't, some embrace it, some don't. But I think it would be interesting to say, over the next years to come and the speed that it's going at, where do we see that going and the impact it has on the people and the work that we do? Because I think there's, with any technology, it's great to embrace it, but we need to understand it, and we need to be able to look at how do we foster that in. And, we've talked about culture, so where does that fit within our culture that we move forward? So it would be interesting from that.
I think it's a great idea. I'm definitely going to bring that to our leadership teams if we get a topic or an event on that. So yeah, that's a great idea. Jason and Bethany, thank you both. Bethany, thanks for inviting Jason on, and Jason, thanks for those insights.
It's great to be here.
And we'll speak soon.
Indeed. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to talking to you again.
Please like, share, comment and subscribe to the ConfigureITDone podcast.